Hello, today we're going to be making our own screen printed ceramic mug using DIY stencils and Underglaze. So if you're excited to learn, hit that like button and let's get into it. Okay, first I'm going to show you how to make some Underglaze transfers. This is how I did the hummingbird. I'm gonna use an easy screen stencil and some black ceramic printing ink. You can also just use regular Underglaze as long as it has been thickened up. The Underglaze transfer paper I'm using, I also got from easyscreenprint.com. You'll want to make sure that you're printing on the side that has a little bit of texture to it. There's a smooth side and a slightly textured side. You wanna print on the slightly textured side. I'm going to print, making sure that I'm not accidentally going over these lines in my table because that will leave a line in the print. Place that stencil shiny side down. I'm gonna scoop out a little bit of this ink and you can see that it is a thick paste. That makes it great for printing. These Amico inks have been super awesome actually because they come pre-thickened, so it's just one less thing you have to worry about. But I like to scoop it onto my squeegee or my rib, and then take my rib and push that underglaze through the stencil onto the Underglaze transfer paper. Oops, I just made a big ol' mess going off the edge there. Any of the leftover ink I can just scrape back into the jar, and then I'll peel up the stencil to reveal my print. And then I'm gonna take my stencil and rinse it out. And then I'm gonna take my stencil and rinse it out right away. If you wanted to print more of these, you could do that without rinsing it out, but you don't want the underglaze to dry in the stencil. It makes it a lot harder to clean, but yeah, so I'm gonna go rinse this out. All right, and next I'll let this underglaze print dry, and then I'm going to take some of my regular underglaze and I'm going to fill in the colors, kind of paint it in, almost as if it's a paint by number or like a coloring page. All right, I've got my slab nice and rolled out, and I'm gonna use a rib to compress the surface so that it is nice and smooth, which will help the printing go a little bit better. And I like to compress both sides, just so that the inside and the outside of my mug are nice and smooth. And my Underglaze transfer is now all dry, so I'm gonna cut it out. Now that my Underglaze transfer is dry, I'm going to cut the shape out, and I like to cut I leave a little bit of space, but cut pretty close around the shape of the print. All right, I've got it all cut out, which means that I can get onto printing. Now, the reason I like to do this part first is I can get this main kind of figure or subject of my design down, and then I'll leave the Underglaze transfer paper on while I print my other patterns and such, and the Underglaze transfer paper will protect it so it doesn't get covered up, and then I can peel it off at the end. So to get the image to transfer, I'm just going to lightly dab it with a damp sponge, very similar to if you were doing like a temporary tattoo. You don't want it to be too wet, but just damp enough that it starts to change color. And then I'll take a rib and I will just buff out all of those print lines, and this will help it transfer onto the clay as well. So get it all buffed out, and now we can start printing all of our patterns, and this is really the fun part. There's a lot of different things that you can do. I've got a lot of different easy screens that I can use to do some patterns and just some fun color blocking. In fact, I think that's what maybe I'm gonna start with. I'll start doing some fun little just splotches of color. And for these, I'm gonna be using the Amico ceramic printing inks again. And you can use a rib, you can use a squeegee, you can use a sponge, but I like to just get a little bit on my sponge, and then I'll just buff it through that stencil onto the clay. And you can use a pretty good amount of pressure to make sure that it goes through that stencil. There I've got my first little color block. Maybe I'll do another one up here. So I'll just lay my stencil back down, I'll grab my sponge, and I'll buff it back through. And I think that's good for my color blocking, so I'm going to go rinse out this stencil and get the next ones ready. Sometimes when I'm printing these patterns, I will just lay down a piece of like old Underglaze Transfer paper, and that just creates a unique edge. That way I'm not left with just like straight edges when I'm done printing. Do another one down in this corner. And another cool thing about these ceramic inks is that they can be mixed together and they will make pretty true colors. Obviously, it is ceramics, so you all know how sometimes mixing colors goes, but these have done pretty well. All right, I've got that muted pink. I'm gonna throw that down maybe right here, and I'll pick some of that pink up. Start rubbing it through. Trying to making sure I don't go over the edge of the stencil and leave an ugly line through the whole thing. All right, so now I'm done printing all of my patterns and my color blocks. Now I'm going to remove the underglaze paper that was over my hummingbird. So to do that, I like to take just a little pair of tweezers or like a needle tool, find the edge, and then I'm gently going to lift and peel back. And if we buffed well at the beginning when we first laid it down, we should get a really clean, smooth transfer. And just like that, you can see we've got some really fun patterns, we've got some really fun color blocking, but none of it is muddling that print because we left the underglaze paper on top while we were printing the rest of the patterns. And then from here, you could take like an ornament cutout and cut out little ornaments of your pattern, whatever you printed. I did this with a mug in mind. So I'm going to use this mug die cutter, and I like to set it down over my design and then take another bat or form or something and just chunk, press it right down in. We can then peel away that extra clay, and we've got a nice little rectangle slab to be turned into a mug. And then I can proceed to make a slab-built mug with these two pieces. And just like that, we've got a super fun little slab-built cylinder. You could turn it into a mug or a vase. I like to let it dry to leather hard, or maybe a little bit before leather hard before I clean up the rim and things like that. That way I'm not messing with the shape as much as possible. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. And if you found this tutorial helpful, be sure to subscribe. We do tutorials like this. We do little projects with our silkscreen stencils all the time, and they are stinking fun. And we would love to have you join us. See you next time.